Good evening. I'd like to start the meeting, our special meeting this evening. Seated tonight, we have Ryan Deasy, Chuck Sheehan, myself, Ben Philbrick, Lynn Conway, and then Marge, you're up at the top of the list to be seated tonight, and we have Andy Meek as our alternate. First up, we have 2 minutes to approve. One we did inadvertently, apparently, and one from last time. So I hear a motion on the 2 minutes, or do we need to do those separately? Keith?
We might as well,
Okay.
just in case there's any.
So for minute number 1688 for 621.
Make a motion to approve the minutes for 1688, 621 as written.
Thank you, Ryan. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chuck. All those in favor?
Aye.
Next up will be the minutes number 1699 from 719.
Make a motion to approve the minutes 1699 from 719 as written.
Thank you, Ryan. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chuck. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Keith, it's all yours.
All right, so under item administrative review, item 5D, 5D1 is 22174 ZON, Town of Stonington, DPW. Zoning permit application for a temporary office trailer to be placed on site. Property located at 86 Alpha Ave, Stonington. Assessors map 79, block 1, lot 24, zones RM20 and LS5. The Stonington Department of Public Works is seeking approval for a temporary office trailer. This is going to be in front of the existing highway garage. This is going to be basically 12 by 60 feet, about 705 square feet. It's needed for office space for the Department of Public Works. They're going to have 4 employees there, especially with a new hire. There's just not room in Town Hall to accommodate everyone. It's supposed to be a temporary fix. It's a 5-year lease for the trailer. It'll be over 7 parking spaces there, but on that site, it's easy to park elsewhere. There's lots of other spaces and places to park. The public doesn't really go there to the highway garage. And this office space is not intended to be open to the public. It's a cost-effective measure. Basically, the only thing the town could afford to do for now, other than build some sort of addition or new public works facility. There's just not really the funds for that. And the Director of Public Works, Barbara McCrell, is here if there's any questions.
I guess my question is, how long is temporary?
5 years. It's a 5-year
5 years?
lease.
So Keith, if this was approved, and it extended past the 5-year mark, would they have to come back and ask for an extension, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think so. We just have to go through this process again.
And the public is not allowed in the trailer? Is that, so if you have an appointment with the town engineer, what do you do?
I don't know that they're not allowed, but it's not intended for the public to go there. It's probably not big enough for a real meeting space.
Come on up, Barbara.
Good evening, my name is Barbara McCrell and I'm the Director of Public Works. The trailer will not have a ramp, an accessible ramp going into it. So we do not plan on having meetings with the public in that space. Typically, we try and meet with the public now because where we work right now is the 3rd floor of Town Hall, and my office is shared with an intern, and then Chris's, the town engineer's office, is basically tied into my office with an open door, and so there's 3 of us in the space right now. If we meet with the public, we typically go down and meet in the conference room because we don't even have enough space for ourselves in our room. I sit close enough to the intern that I can almost touch him. If we hold our arms out, we can touch each other. And so we did a facility assessment, which I referenced here, and even for just building an administrative office, it was about $7 million. The Board of Finance basically last year denied our ability to move forward with any sort of planning or preliminary design on that. And we have another engineer coming that was approved, a new position that was approved, and we have no place to put that person. And so, so we are left with getting a trailer and putting it in front of the highway garage facility. And I think I got lost in the weeds maybe of your original question, I'm sorry. But, oh, so yeah, so as far as meeting, we typically meet at the town hall and use the conference room on the lower level to meet with the public.
And do you feel positive that you're going to be able to move forward and be in a new space before the 5-year lease is up?
Right now, the Board of Finance has no intention on creating a new space for us. And, you know, so I don't know, we still own the property over in Old Mystic where the school administration building is. And during the last year's budget process, they have directed us to hold on to that building and utilize it for storage. And so I think it's going to have to be a further master plan that other people are involved in to make decisions about where people will be in the next 5 years.
So is it fair to say that it would just be town employees in this trailer? You would not be having anybody in the public? You would always meet them in that conference room?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right
And
now,
how many employees would be in the trailer?
there would be 4 employees. It would be our engineering department and myself. So my office will be there, and the town engineer, the civil engineer, and an intern.
Barbara, do you have to get a waiver from ADA for this?
If it's not open to the public,
I don't know that if the town engineer is in there without a waiver from ADA, that you can just say that it's not accessible to the public. I think if you read ADA, you have to be accessible to the public. And I don't think you can make special accommodations to meet with people with disabilities. You have to accommodate everybody without a waiver. So the building official will be able to advise you better on this.
okay.
But I've had some horrible experiences with exactly the same subject, where you contemplate, you know, a special accommodation for people with disabilities, and it's not allowed. It's not allowed without a waiver from the state building official. So I think maybe you meet the criteria because it is temporary, although the state building official might not look at 5 years as temporary. You might be able to get a waiver for a shorter period of time. I think they might just tell you, put the ramps in. So again, the sanctions on the ADA side, as you know, are very serious.
Oh, yeah.
And rather than open yourself to that, talk to the building official to see if a waiver of ADA is required. If so, I think you have to apply to the state building official and get it in advance.
Okay. I'll make sure that when we place the trailer down, that we leave the space that we need to put a ramp in, if it's going to, the requirement.
Like, you know, from the previous grading plan, I superimposed this on a PDF, and it looks like it can be accommodated very easily from the grades that I looked at on the sand shed plan.
Yes, it's a very flat space. Yes.
So I think it's an easy accommodation, either the ramps or the waiver, one or the other. But the building official, I think, can give you a more current interpretation of ADA than I can.
Yeah. I was really trying to make it so that the public didn't meet with us and we didn't have the ramp there for financial reasons. Because for renting an ADA ramp, it's actually more than just buying. For renting a ramp for 5 years, it's more than buying a ramp. And so I was trying to not make that purchase and then own a ramp. So it's a struggle when I'm always trying to look at things financially on how to save money and do the best for the town.
As a veteran of a lot of public programs, I sympathize with you.
Yeah.
This is a serious requirement, though, and I do not think ADA will allow you to do it this way without a waiver.
Okay.
So if we were gonna move forward, just, would that be something we could stipulate, that they would have to make that, you know, go to the building official and get that, either the waiver or,
Or the ramp.
oh, sorry. I was saying that we could make it a stipulation then on approval to have them go meet with the building official and either get the waiver or confirm that they do need to put the ramp in place and, I guess, purchase a ramp, since it seems like the rental would be too much.
Yeah.
I also think we should have this be for a finite period of time, the 5 years that you've indicated for the rental process.
Agreed.
That Lightspeed comes along as well.
Yep, stipulate for 5 years.
Any other questions from the board? Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the application of the town of Stonington DPW, subject to the very articulate waiver that my colleague here expressed on ADA, and subject to the condition that it be granted for 5 years.
Second.
Thank you. Comments, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So carried. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you
Thank
very
you, Barbara.
much.
Good luck.
Thanks.
So for old business, item 6A and 6B, which are two bond release applications, recommend tabling those to the next meeting, but item 6C can be addressed tonight. That is PZ 2226BR, Peter Rogan and Stephen Sedman, bond reduction and release application for bond number 217 for shared driveway construction associated with PZ 8865SD, Jeremy Hill Development, 85, 83, 79, and 81 Greenhaven Road, Pawcatuck, lots 3, 4, 6, and 7. This application is for the full release of a bond of over $25,000 for shared driveway construction associated with this subdivision by Jeremy Hill Development Corp. This was a 10-lot subdivision on Greenhaven Road that was approved back in 1988. The bond was just posted last year as a condition of construction for a single-family house at 85 Greenhaven Road. Per our regulations, paving of a shared drive is required when the shared drive serves 3 or more homes. And that's what this house did when it was built. The driveway location was relocated from the original subdivision plan, which originally didn't require paving, which is fine. They can do that. They just had to post this bond to assure that they would build the driveway. So unlike most bonds you see here, this is not an erosion and sedimentation control bond where that's the point of it. It was really just to make sure they paved the driveway. And they did pave the driveway. It looks like they did a good job according to the zoning official in the pictures here.
Has the town engineer looked at this, Keith?
He has not yet. So that's a stipulation that's recommended, is that the bond may be released pending
Right.
town engineer review, just in case there's some issue, maybe with the driveway apron or something that he might have comments on.
Is there a need to act on this tonight? Do we have the time to allow the town engineer to look at it and make, because normally we have the input of the town engineer on these, and if he's not satisfied with it, we don't release the full bond.
Right, I mean, there is time.
Does the town engineer have a date that he plans to go and look at it?
Not that I know of. There's a lot of applications before him.
If we did put a stipulation that we would only release it pending the town engineer, would that get it maybe to the top of his list?
It might, and my assumption was that might not have to wait till the next meeting. The town engineer could just go out and look at it. It didn't seem much for him to review there, was my thinking.
I think the stipulation that we have the town engineer sign off on it, and that would complete the full bond release would be adequate as a stipulation.
I would agree. Anybody else?
Agreed.
Okay, make a motion with
That's
that
your motion?
stipulation to approve with that stipulation for the town engineer.
Thank you, Ryan. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Lynn. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Thank you.
And that is it for old business.
On to our public hearing.
Right.
So, Lynn, do you have the call for that,
Sure.
please?
Pursuant to the general statutes of the state of Connecticut, revision of 1958, and all amendments thereto, and pursuant to the zoning regulations for the town of Stonington, Connecticut, the Planning and Zoning Commission hereby gives notice that it will hold a public hearing at the Stonington Board of Education District Office, 40 Field Street, Pawcatuck, Connecticut, on Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022, at 7 p.m. on the following application. PZ 2221RA, Town of Stonington, PZC, zoning regulation amendment application to create regulations for cannabis establishments in the community.
Thank you, Lynn. Seated this evening, we have Ryan Deasy, Chuck Sheehan, myself, Ben Philbrick, Lynn Conway, and Marge Salinger. Alternate will be Andy Meek. The process is there's a sign-up sheet, hopefully by the door, for those who would like to speak in favor, against, or general comments. And first we'll have the applicant, which will be Keith this evening, I believe. And then we'll have public input and rebuttal by the applicant, staff input, and the board can ask questions, close the meeting, and hopefully vote this evening.
Well, thank you. Well, this application is a zoning regulation amendment submitted by you, the Planning and Zoning Commission. It would change the language of the zoning regulations to allow different types of cannabis establishments by special use permit in certain commercial and industrial zones. So if the commission approves the application, people looking to do business in town would still have to apply, submit a special use permit, and have a public hearing to consider their specific applications in a certain location. By way of background, as you know, the state last year approved Public Act 21-1, which legalized recreational cannabis in the state. The act is 300 pages long. A lot of it deals with the permitting process and criminal law. And basically it says that a cannabis establishment shall be treated as a similar type of business, let's say a liquor store if it's retail, unless the town adopts regulations to say otherwise. Special use permit is required though for the state law. So according to the act, towns can either amend zoning regulations to completely prohibit cannabis. You have that option. You can establish reasonable restrictions. Establish restrictions on proximity to other types of establishments like schools and places of worship. So prior to deciding on a course of action here, both the Commission and the Board of Selectmen wanted to hear from the public on the issue. So a public referendum was held on the general question of whether these sorts of establishments should be permitted in town. That was held on October 5th last year, and the question was passed by a vote of 2,106 to 1816 in favor of allowing these types of businesses. So in order to have time to develop new zoning regulations, the Commission back in March approved a 6-month moratorium on new applications. So that's effective from March 21st to September 21st. Because there's a 20-day lag between the approval of a new regulation and its effective date, for a new regulation to be on the ground by September 21st, it would have to be approved by September 1st. If not, the town would be open to applications elsewhere. Now, after this regulation amendment was submitted, or at least right before it, the General Assembly approved another public act, 22-103, which modified the language of the original bill. And one of the changes was to eliminate the restrictions on the number of cannabis establishments a municipality could have based on its population. So For months, I've been telling the commission that state statute limits our town to one retail establishment and one microcultivator because of our population. Well, the state took that away, so now there is no limit. For both.
For both.
And we can still have regulations that say that if we want that limit, but it's not a requirement in the state statute anymore. So as far as the proposed text, there's several pages to it. There's a lot of new definitions, which are mostly just copied from state statute with the different types of cannabis establishments. There's the cultivator, delivery service, retail, and others. Section 4 of the regulations basically inserts the cannabis uses into the language of various commercial zones where they're allowed. It's more clear where they're allowed when you look at the use chart, which is on page 25. So first I'll say where these are proposed to be and then get into why. The two main ones that will probably affect people the most are cannabis retail establishments, which are proposed to be allowed by special permit in the TC80 zone and the HI60 zone. Microcultivators, which are basically growers of under 15,000 square feet, would be allowed by special permit in the M1, LI130, and HM zones. These are the town's 3 industrial zoning districts. Cannabis delivery service or transporters allowed in the industrial zones, but also HI60, TC80, and GC60. And a delivery service is what it sounds like. It's just someone who can deliver cannabis, but they don't sell it, grow it, or do anything like that. Food and beverage manufacturer allowed in the industrial zones. Product manufacturer, same thing. Product packager, same thing. Now, this regulation proposes not allowing cannabis cultivators in town. And a cultivator, as opposed to a microcultivator, is a growing establishment of over 15,000 square feet. So the idea is to sort of start conservatively with a small one. It also doesn't allow cannabis dispensary facilities, which is a medical-only facility, and a cannabis hybrid retail establishment. The reason for that is, like I mentioned before, the town had the limit of just one for the retail, but not one for the dispensary or the hybrid retail. So at the time, that was the idea. If those are unlimited, start conservatively and only have the ones that are limited. As far as the reasoning behind this, the cannabis retail establishments, they've proven to be very popular in places like Massachusetts and other states where they're allowed. So the regulation allows them the 2 highway-oriented commercial districts, TC80 and HI60. TC80 is the area near exit 90 in Mystic, HI60 near exit 92 in Pawcatuck. The districts are basically chosen to minimize risks because these areas already permit high traffic uses. They have good highway access, fewer residential neighbors, fewer nearby schools, and other more sensitive uses than other commercial districts. And they both have some underutilized or vacant properties that could be available for this use, especially the HI60 has more vacant developable properties. In the cannabis microcultivators, and those similar uses would be allowed in the town's industrial zoning districts. Retail uses were not proposed in the town's industrial zones because unlike a lot of communities, Stonington just doesn't have, one large industrial area that's located away from residences there. The industrial areas we have tend to be smaller, scattered all over town, and there's always residences nearby wherever you find our industrial zones. And the regulation includes minimum distance requirements from schools and residences, which I'll get into here. Section 6.6.27 is sort of the meat of the new specific rules for cannabis establishments. That's on page 26. That's where you find the distance requirements, where any cannabis establishment, no matter the type, has to be 1,000 feet from a public or a private elementary or secondary school, daycare facility, dependency treatment center, public park or recreation area. Has to be 100 feet from any residential use or place of worship. No cannabis establishment shall be permitted in a building that's also used for residential purposes. There's a section on public safety, security, and nuisances, which talks about providing and maintaining adequate security measures to prevent and detect diversion, theft, and meeting the certain statutes that talk about that issue. They have to provide measures to prevent nuisance impacts to surrounding areas, including but not limited to odors, noise, waste, excessive lighting, smoking on premises, or environmental impacts. Now, there is a section, it's a highlighted one in the text, the point 3 here, that was not in the original submission, but I'm recommending it be added in there, which is that cannabis microcultivator applications will include a detailed odor mitigation plan to be reviewed by a third-party consultant chosen by the town with expertise in odor mitigation measures for cannabis growers. Such review shall be paid for by the applicant. In talking to the planner in another small town in Massachusetts, that was an issue that was a risk that they found, that they were having issues, odor issues from a microcultivator, and that that was a way to address it. There are these experts out there who advise cannabis growers on these plans. Cannabis can't be consumed, ingested, or smoked on the premises. That's part of the state law anyway. Growing and storage has to be indoors. This proposes hours of operation for cannabis retail establishments as 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and Sunday 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Keith, how did you come up with those hours?
I think with this, it was, I saw it in another Connecticut town's regulation, and it sounded reasonable.
I was thinking 8 to 8, Monday to Saturday, and weekdays, I guess, and then 10 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost like liquor store hours, is that kind of where you were going?
Well, liquor stores are later than that now. I
Oh,
think.
yeah, no, I just was curious where the hours you were coming up with.
Just 10 o'clock seemed kind of late, like, I don't know what everybody else
Maybe.
thinks, but
Yeah, it doesn't have to be 10.
we can talk about that later if you want.
I think it would make a lot of sense to just mimic liquor store hours. That way, nobody's confused.
So when do liquor stores normally close?
9,
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe they're 9 to 9 except for Sundays. when
Right.
it's-
6, I think, 5 or 6.
Yeah, is it 10 to 5 or something, 10 to 6?
I'd be all right with that, saying the same as a liquor store.
Makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Good idea.
And the application has to be referred to the Board of Police Commissioners and local local fire district. Section on traffic and parking management, where the retail establishments have to include a traffic and parking management plan, which will include their specific plans for addressing heavy customer traffic, parking, including any overflow parking areas, planned police traffic details, or outdoor pedestrian queuing areas, loading and deliveries. As far as permitting in the regulation, they have to, basically the approval is conditional until they get their final state approval. On page 27, you'll see highlighted there the change that had to be made because that changed the state law, crossing out the limit of 1, and basically rewording it and not referencing the state law. So it does still say the commission may only approve a maximum of 1 cannabis retail establishment and 1 cannabis microcultivator in town. And to prevent any surprises, the regulation specifically says you can't permit a cannabis establishment through our change of non-conforming use process. That's where an existing business that is legally non-conforming, doesn't belong in a certain zone, can come to the commission and ask to change to another use that doesn't belong there. So that way you won't have cannabis businesses sort of appearing where no one expected them. The regulation basically prohibits cannabis establishments in the floating zones. Specifically doesn't mention it's prohibited in the Maritime Heritage District where the seaport is, just because the language of that zone doesn't list prohibited uses and might be a bit confusing. People might think that's the only prohibited use if we add that in, but it could be added in if the commission wanted it there. And this regulation crosses out the temporary cannabis moratorium. So the report gets into the benefits and risks of cannabis establishments and from a land use perspective, which means regulating the benefits and risks of the potential land use. And as far as the benefits, there is a direct financial benefit to the town if these are approved, which is the statute requires a 3% sales tax, which goes directly for the town. It has to be used for designated purposes, and there's a list of those in the statutes. It's also the more indirect economic benefits like jobs, increased property and personal property tax dollars, and also just generally abiding by the town's referendum vote where the public said that they were in favor of this. And the commission doesn't usually have that sort of benefit of a public vote on the things it decides. And from a land use perspective, there's risks to allowing cannabis establishments, which is potential negative impacts to area residents, things like traffic and parking, public safety issues, odors or excessive lighting from the grow facilities. And of these risks, the most significant ones seem to be the traffic and parking from the new retail facilities. These are issues that PZC sort of deals with a lot of things, is managing traffic and parking. The risk of odors from a microcultivator, in a way, seems to be the biggest risk of the proposal as I see it, because it's not an issue, first of all, that the commission really deals with too much, and it's not easy to enforce or to regulate. I checked with the Department of Consumer Protection. They clarified that their licensing process does not specifically consider odor control measures for microcultivators. So that language about third-party review is recommended here.
Keith, can you repeat that language on the third party as far as the odor? We're requiring third party assessment, certification, then they have to abide by it and have their plan intact before it's permitted? Is that very specific?
Yeah, the wording is cannabis microcultivator applications shall include a detailed odor mitigation plan to be reviewed by a third-party consultant chosen by the town with expertise in odor mitigation measures for cannabis growers. Such review shall be paid for by the applicant. So it's just
So an
us getting that
assessment,
expert
but
assurance.
I just want to be sure, okay? Because I hear that, and it says an assessment is made. That's very different from the applicant will accept whatever that assessment is requiring, and that it's put into effect before a permit is given.
Is there
Am I not hearing that right?
Is there wording that says that they would be required to implement the plan? Not just have an odor mitigation plan, but then implement said plan?
Yeah, odor control.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't specifically say that, so it can be added to be more.
Okay. I think that's where you're going with.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Make
then
it- make it
does that
stick.
plan have to, and I don't know, just discussion. So, 'cause I'm not familiar with odor plans, but depending upon what zone it's in, does odor mitigation have to be, do we have to say within a certain amount of space from the facility? Depending upon the zone being more crowded or what's next to it or whatever. Because I understand that you said it can't be near, certain type of, establishments within 1,000 feet. But again, I'm not familiar. So do we need to be specific about that? Because I have heard the same from others, that it's the odor that's the issue.
Yeah,
Concern.
from the grow facilities. I haven't seen zoning regulations that get that specific.
I just don't want to get caught up here, right?
A good point.
I don't
Right.
want to get caught up that we're requiring something different from somebody else, or they did the mitigation, it was good within 10 feet, and so they executed it, and now we have a whole bunch of complaints coming in, and we should have made it 1,000 feet. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I just think that needs to be explored. I don't know, you said another town had something similar. Maybe they rated it based on what zone or what the nearest buildings were. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I haven't seen zoning regulations that have that level of detail about odor control. It's basically, towns seem to hire experts who advise the commission on whether what they're proposing would seem to work or should be adequate.
But they have to get guidance from the town. You're hiring a consultant, they have to have a guidance from the town, is what the
There has to be standard.
expectations
I was
are.
gonna say.
I would say 500 feet, it has to meet a certain standard.
No? Is it
No, but I'm
500?
judging it at 500 feet, most odors are relatively dissipated.
I don't know.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
It depends on
Right.
Yeah.
what the lapse rate is in the atmosphere at the time, if
Well,
it's
yeah.
an inversion,
Right.
then, I know I have some experience with this from the wastewater industry, where,
Well, that's what I'm
there
wondering. That's the
can
only.
be some very offensive effects on neighbors, and odor control is a science, and there are standards. So, what
Do we borrow it from them?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I just
But
like to
I think
propose-
I think you raised a very good point.
Yeah.
And that is,
Yeah.
one that it not only is a study of the impact, but that you've got to do something about it to comply with a particular standard.
Correct.
I guess my question would be with the expert that the town would hire. Do we know of any expert that would be able to ask them, what's the normal standard for the mitigation plan that you would advise for this kind of zone? For this.
I think a licensed environmental professional, LEP, or an industrial hygienist, either or, could easily answer that question as to, what is a standard that we could apply and make reference to. And I do think that
That would make sense, or even a minimum, maximum range.
that the odor control measures have to be a part of, the compliance of the application as well.
Because it does have to depend on the weather. Similar to a traffic control study, it
Right.
depends on what time of day. As you
Right.
say, if it's an inversion versus a northwest breeze, it's blowing
Well,
everything out.
design conditions assume usually the worst conditions, so,
No wind.
you can superimpose
Today.
a lapse rate where there is an inversion. Lapse rate
Yeah.
is the rate at which the atmosphere changes temperature as you go up in the atmosphere. And an inversion is, it doesn't get colder as you go up, it gets warmer. That's what an inversion is. And an inversion pushes emissions down.
Right.
So normally, these types of studies impose, restrictive conditions and difficult conditions. So it is kind of a worst-case analysis.
Well, does the water pollution control, do they have any stipulations?
There are. I
Guidance?
can't tell you what they are offhand. It's in an environmental arena, a licensed environmental professional or LEP could easily answer that question, or an industrial hygienist could easily answer that question. So, we should, I think, perhaps reference a standard, and I definitely think Lynn has raised a point, a good one, that it's not just that you have to do an impact analysis, but that your plan has to incorporate odor control standards.
Numbers.
To effectuate the standard.
Right, numbers, yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about the micro cultivators, and we've got a couple different zones on the table here, would it make sense to reduce the number of proposed eligible zones for them? I'm thinking the LI 130 zone has very few neighbors. You've got the highway on one side of it, and there are houses adjacent to it, but as far as I know, the only development is quite far removed from those houses. We're talking about the Togwong Business Park, essentially.
Correct.
If we limited it to there, you know, we should still find some standards for odor control, but we could be cutting a lot of potential problems off before they happen.
Because all the M1s are very much in residential.
Right.
area.
And, you know, the LA 130 too, there's a surprising number of homes in the LI 130.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sort of between the business park and Dunkley Heating and Cooling. But yeah, that's one thing to look at is the zones. And that's sort of how I pictured the studies working, is that the expert will look at it in a context-sensitive way and talk about odor controls needed for that neighborhood it's in. You know, if there are homes nearby, that's the goal. The biggest goal is to not have it disturb the residential neighbors there.
But it's not just residential neighbors,
Right.
right? So, I mean, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
You know, I think we're just using the Togwong Business Park because, you know, it was brought up. But there are other businesses there, right? So it's not just residential.
Yeah.
Right. It could be outdoor dining or something
Exactly.
adjacent to this, and
Exactly.
it could be even more offensive, so.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it has to be assessed at the property line and controlled on the site. And,
Not go beyond it.
and not go beyond,
Yeah.
really. It's to not be offensive to abutters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's, I think with modern technology, that's achievable. It's not going to be inexpensive because, you know, the types of filtration systems with activated carbon filters are expensive to operate, but
That's a cost of
that's a
doing
cost of
business.
doing business.
Yeah.
Yep.
As far as the status of other towns in Connecticut, there's a map in here put together by CT Insider that shows, at least as far as recently as February, the status of different towns, zoning regulations, and a lot of them are in the same boat as us of having moratoriums, not actually having regulations developed. Most of the towns in our surrounding area are in the middle of moratoriums also, like Groton and North Stonington. Some towns have decided to just prohibit them permanently, like Old Lyme. And some towns like East Lyme and Newington and some others have already adopted zoning regulations to have these sort of businesses. You know, when looking at the impact on Massachusetts communities, I really couldn't find any apparent media references to land use or zoning enforcement issues with these types of businesses. Per a recent Mass Live article, there have been few negative impacts statewide to the extent that some communities have voluntarily stopped requiring impact fees due to the lack of any impacts in their town. Indoor cultivation is a very high energy user, so that's one emerging issue with that. I had some conversations with planners in Massachusetts towns. One in a coastal town in Mass basically described the retail establishments as a typical weekend high traffic use. That's something like, he described it as like video stores, video rental stores used to be in the 80s and 90s, where you see a lot of people coming and going, you know, at certain times, like Friday night, Saturday night. And when they first open up, they're especially popular, and then it sort of evens out, especially as more in the region open. And the other town I mentioned the odor control as an issue. And theirs was an industrial zone, industrial area, and it was still a bit of an issue. So the decisions the commission will have with this is approval of the proposed text, with additional modifications, or denial. So if it is denied, these establishments would be allowed wherever similar or non-cannabis establishments are permitted without the extra protections in these regulations. So a more effective option would be for the commission to approve a scaled-down version of the regulation. You know, if you're not comfortable with the things in here, just shrink it down to something that is comfortable, so at least we'll have more of the protections there. There are lots of alternatives where if you wanted to modify the submitted text prior to approval, some of these are prohibiting or further restricting certain cannabis types that are too problematic. For instance, if we can't get to a consensus about regulating microcultivators, we don't have to approve microcultivators. It could just be retail and the other ones. Modifying the proposed distance requirements, allowing additional cannabis types that aren't covered in this proposal, like the cannabis dispensaries or the hybrid retailers, which is medical and recreational sales. You could eliminate the limitation on only one cannabis retailer or microcultivator in town. If you do that, I'd recommend putting in a minimum distance requirement between establishments, so you won't have a clustering of the businesses like two retail shops right next to each other. You could allow them in additional zoning districts, but if you go too far with that, a second regulation amendment is probably necessary because it would really exceed the scope of this amendment.
So Keith, I have a couple of questions. The distance, and you did a great job, so thank you for that. And particularly, you know, that you looked into what other towns have done and what issues they've had. I think it's hard in the early days to really know, and it's nice to have a reference, so thank you. So the distance, you know, I think you said 1,000 feet within schools, from schools, daycare centers, etc. Did you take those distances based on liquor stores, bars? How did you come up with those numbers?
It really just seemed like a reasonable round number. It was just sort of looking at what some other Connecticut towns had. A lot of them had smaller distance requirements than that. One of them, I think it was maybe Vernon, went up to 3,000 feet between one of these and a school.
And what is our, I just don't know, what is our stipulation for liquor stores, et cetera?
I don't know if
that?
we even have one. Let's see.
We're painfully aware of what it is for gas stations.
Yes, we do know that.
I've been lost track about that. That's profound.
Yeah, I think we got rid of those actually in our regulation. We used to have a requirement where any sort of liquor sales place, including a restaurant, couldn't be located within a certain amount of feet from another one. So it prohibited restaurants with liquor permits from opening next to each other, because that was an issue that was done away with over 10 years ago.
We don't have anything that says a bar can't open within a number of feet from a grammar school?
We don't. The state might.
The state
Yeah,
does.
I think the liquor commission does.
I think the
We
liquor,
can't
I
Vine Street School's property,
Yeah.
think
so I'm
the,
guessing there probably isn't a limit, because I think
I
they
didn't
do
know if it was
abut.
grandfathered in or something like that, you know? in high school, there's I mean, I know there's the one right near Stanford Davis and then right there.
Chuck, can I ask you a question? I'm trying to visualize what 1,000 feet would look like. So let's say coming into this building would be across the street over there. I'm trying to just get to visualize.
Football
the
field.
I like from here to that, like, pink house over there.
Pink house.
Probably another 200 feet beyond that.
Okay, that's, I mean, just eyeballing it.
I like the idea, I like the idea of distances, so you don't
Yeah.
cluster, uses
Exactly.
like this all in one location and create a district that is based on this one theme.
Yeah.
Not that we know that that's gonna be a problem, but in the beginning, if you're gonna be cautious, I think the separating distance is.
Are you okay
is
with
good.
1,000 feet?
So it's
Yeah,
not
I
gonna-
just wondered what, again, kind of going with
Right,
the
right.
whole hours of operation, is there a way we can make this straightforward,
Kind of mirror
right?
it, yeah.
So, but 1,000 feet, I mean, I have nothing against 1,000 feet.
Right,
So we've said it's with schools, daycare centers,
Dependency treatment centers, public parks, or public recreation areas.
It's a good one, so, yeah.
okay, schools and daycare, right?
Mhm.
And then, did you say places of worship? Is that, did I hear you say that?
100
Places of
feet.
worship is 100, the distance requirements is 100 feet from any residential use or place of worship.
I think that should be higher for some reason.
Keep it at 1,000, why not? I mean,
Yeah, why not
keep
just keep
1,000
everything the
consistent,
same?
yeah.
And that would be both for retail and the micro.
Yeah,
Mic-
I would think
the
we keep
micro.
it consistent, yeah.
And then my other
Keep it 1,000
question was,
feet?
you had a definition of micro, cultivator of 15,000 plants per square feet, or
50,000 square foot.
square foot.
15.
Is that a standard definition of
It-
a micro grower by
It is
state?
just from the state statute.
Okay, I just didn't know. Once again, I don't know. Okay.
Actually, it's not more than 10,000 square feet.
Okay.
Of grow space.
Okay, so we wanted to make sure that matches.
Yeah, for some reason, the cannabis cultivator, which is the bigger one, is not less than 15,000, but micro cultivators only go up to 10,000. So I don't know what happens between 10 and 15.
Okay, but we said we were going to allow the micro cultivator.
Right.
We're going to specifically,
The
okay,
smaller
so
one.
that's 10,000, okay. All right.
As far as the plan of conservation and development, the POCD really doesn't mention cannabis at all. It's a topic that never came up. There's some goals in there that you talk about economic development and that sort of thing. Regulation amendment appears to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan is just the pattern of land use in general, strategy of development, so the zoning map plus the zoning regulations. As far as responses we got from others, we have the town attorney's comments saying that they're legally acceptable to form, and he's the one who pointed out that the state got rid of that limit by population. The police commission basically had no comment on the regulation amendment, but they just wanted to review the specific applications when they come, and that's actually baked into the regulation itself. Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments found that this would not have a negative intermunicipal impact. DEP said that it was consistent with the Coastal Management Act, which is really the only thing they look for when you send them zoning regulation amendments. So as far as the required votes, it's the application's conformance with the POCD, the application's conformance with the comprehensive plan, and the decision on the regulation amendment. If this were to be approved tonight, the effective date would be August 22nd of this year.
Keith, I just have a couple more questions. The impact use fee that you alluded to, that's outside of the regulations, right? That's
Oh, the impact fee, I think what I mentioned was the community impact fee in Massachusetts. that's something that towns can charge them.
It's totally outside of our preview, though. I mean, that's.
It's like a bond issue?
finance.
Yes,
It's like a bond issue.
Yeah, I mean, our Connecticut state statutes don't allow towns to charge them an impact fee. We basically just get the 3% taxes, and we can use that for certain
Okay, I
things.
just wanted to make sure we didn't have to say anything. And then you didn't list it as prohibited in the maritime zone because nothing else is listed as prohibited. But is it prohibited in the maritime zone? Again, I don't want to get into an issue. And it's better to be specific.
The way it's written, it's not technically prohibited. I can't imagine that the commission would ever approve cannabis at the
But
seaport, but
we have very little legs to stand on if we don't say it's prohibited in the regulation.
in the floating zone, you do have more flexibility to say no, but it wouldn't hurt to add it in there and, yeah,
Yeah.
add it in
So
there
I
as
think
being
we should
prohibited.
add that. And then, is there anything special about signage or anything that we need to add? I know you said something about lighting.
You know, I didn't put anything about signage in this regulation, figuring that our signage regulations would cover it. The state statutes are very specific about how they can advertise, not necessarily the size, but the things that they can say in
and
these
whatnot.
signs.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure. Thanks.
Keith, do we have to act on this tonight? I see the time frame on page 41, but what you don't say is, do we have, what latitude do we have in
Well-
considering this and maybe taking it up at a future meeting?
For us to not risk being uncovered, you know, and open to an application without regulations, it would have to be approved by September 1st.
Okay.
So we do have the second meeting in August. There's a couple other public hearings there, but
With an
We do.
immediate effective date?
the effective date wouldn't be till
Acceptable?
20 days out.
And that would be September
Right,
1st.
so we do, so I just, again, Keith, just to clarify, although we can approve on September 1st, because it wouldn't be effective until September 20th, we do have a 20-day gap
And
if somebody came
But it'd
in.
be August.
the moratorium doesn't really end until September 21st.
Okay,
So we would be safe.
We would be safe on
thanks.
Any other questions for Keith?
I do also think that we should specify 1 and 1 and not leave it for conjecture
Agreed.
or, and then we can
Yeah.
always,
You can always open the door.
increase later on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, Mr. Chairman, we had this parking issue tonight, and we really don't have an abundance of people at the meeting. We might want to consider leaving this public hearing open until the next meeting. You know, to give people an opportunity to, I expected a lot more people to comment on this. And I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't, since we have the time, since we really aren't getting a lot of public input
Well,
on
let's
this,
see what the public,
I don't want to diminish what we have here. I think it's
Right.
wonderful that we have people here, but
we'll take
this
that.
certainly isn't what I expected, you know.
And I don't think-
I've heard that from other local towns too, that, you know, when they've dealt with the issue of cannabis general zoning regulations, there wasn't much in the way of public comment, which was sort of surprising all around. I think that would change if it's a real application. You might get more interest.
Now, my wife will listen to this hearing and say, you could have come home early and you know, instead you posted it. I think that.
We'll
in
take that
terms
into
of
consideration. Yep,
Something that is this important to the community.
well, I think he wants
that-
more information too.
We do have issues.
Yeah.
I think Lynn raised a couple of very valid points on standards, you know, on odor control, some revisions that we've suggested to the language, and maybe we should consider, and I throw this out for discussion.
Well, at the moment, I'd like to hear from the public.
Yes, obviously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleen? We'll get to, well, you signed up for, it's the only signature I see. And then I'll open it to the floor. Do you need more time to prepare?
I'll tell you, it was a little bit of shock, I know it is. I was shocked. I was shocked on the agenda, and I just saw it late this time. Anyway, less discussion on that, my way. Okay, for the public hearing and the record, my name is Carlene Donnarummo, as you all know. Oh, I just lost my own paper. Oh, no, here. I want to concur with you that I really expected a lot more people here tonight, especially the LI 130 people up on Togwonk Road. And I just have a feeling they just don't know what's going on. So I would suggest that you put some kind of an article in the papers and let people know that this is what the town is considering. Because people came here and wanted it. So let's see what they have to say after you say how it's going to go in this town. They may not like some of it, which is what I want to talk about, where I feel that there could be some improvements using my experience and background as a business educator and teacher too. So some of my comments are very technical. So let's get going. I'm going to go by my article. So if you've got your laptops opened up to these things, this might help you understand what I'm trying to say. In the first article, there is an expression in 6 places in those regulations that say a person that. And that really upsets me because of my background. It really should say a person who. And I think that you're not going to change the meaning of the regulation if you change the word that to who. So that might be something you wanted to consider, even though these were copied exactly from the state. Maybe they should have had someone like me when they did this thing. Anyway, in this section 2, also, this is still section 1, under cannabis delivery service, it specifies the word department, and I think it means the public health department. So I would ask you to add public health before the word, because I'm saying, what department does that mean? Does it mean our department? So that would be helpful in clarifying that. And also at the end of that first section, it says a combination thereof. I don't know what that meant. Maybe you do, but I don't. And maybe you should look at that, even though that you're copying this from state statutes. The second thing under this article is under the words, under cannabis dispensary facility. Again, the word department should be clarified, in my opinion. And in then a little typing thing here, there should be a space between the 2 little sections there. That's very easily fixed. And the last comment on number 4, under the cannabis micro cultivator, I'm a little bit confused. I think the word, this means this is being done indoors, doesn't it?
Yes.
So I would add the word indoor establishment. So it's very clear that you're making a distinction between indoor and outdoor. I'm going to give you my paper at the end so you can think about this a little bit more. Article 5 was really something that bothered me and confused me a lot. I just had a real lot of trouble with that. If you look under the GC 60, it says cannabis delivery service and transporter. They're allowed, but where in the world are they going to deliver them? They can't deliver them anywhere. It doesn't say you can deliver them to a retail establishment. Confusing. In the M1 zone, it says you can do delivery and transport, and has a lot of other uses also. But selling is not permitted in that category, and it seems to me that maybe you should let it done because it's right there. They're doing it, they're making the product. Why can't they sell it right there if we're going to let it be in this town?
I hope I'm interpreting this correctly, but if I'm not, I'm sure you'll try to clarify it. Let's go to Article 6 on page 26 of 40. I strongly support the planner's suggestion of hiring an outside expert, as you have done tonight, at the applicant's expense, of course. But, so they would be developing the odor mitigation plan. But I agree with you during your discussion that it's fine to have a plan, but the applicant has to adhere to it and implement it. And so I would suggest in that section you should say that he develops an odor mitigation plan which the applicant must adhere to and implement. And I've written that on the paper that you can think about. And I also support the idea of only approving a maximum of one cannabis retail establishment and one cannabis, micro cultivator in our town, because that is what the residents voted on. The vote may have been completely different if the new regulations were in effect at the time that we voted. Maybe they wouldn't like these things all over town. Maybe they would have said, no, we don't want it. So I think we need to adhere to what was approved at the voting for the town. I hope I stressed that point enough. Under 6.6.27.5.1, this is talking about the commission's conditional approval. I don't understand what that means. I really don't. In zoning, in our zoning, we don't have conditional approval. So maybe you can talk about that and see what conditional approval means. In this section, also, in 6.6.27.5.4, states that retail cannabis sales shall not be considered an accessory use to any other use or activity. To me, this means that a grocery store, a tattoo parlor or beauty parlor or a CDP seller cannot sell cannabis. And I completely agree. We don't want everyone and his brother selling cannabis all over our town. So I think that's a good thing that's been put in this regulation. And going to Article 7 on page 28 of 40, again, this word cannabis establishment is used in these floating zones. And I'm a little confused as to, does this mean to the growing of cannabis inside a building or outside in the ground? Or does it mean the sale of cannabis in a building? I'm wondering if there's some way of expressing exactly what is meant right there. I'd like to hear some discussion on this point too when you get around to, and I hope you do hold this hearing open. I really do. Also in this section regarding the NDD floating zone, the word N of NDD means neighborhood. And this regulation was meant to protect neighbors and neighborhoods. In my opinion, there should not be any cannabis-associated activity in any NDD approvals, and I would suggest that you omit the exception with that particular NDD proposal. In conclusion, I would like to say it would be nice for all of us if we could have seen what the other towns have adopted in their regulations. I would have done it if I had time, but I didn't find out about this until Friday. So that's the kind of way I would have researched this thing myself. But anyway, that's beside the point. Our town planner really has done a tremendous job. This is a really great report. But I do think that there are some tweaking that has to be done. I wrote something here, I can't even read what I wrote. The state's statutes are specific about how to advertise. And that's not mentioned in these regulations at all. Signage is not mentioned. Lighting is not specific. Parking is not specific. Those are some items I think that maybe should be included in this regulation, rather than relying on our own regulations, or at least referred to and said, parking should adhere to zoning regulations, so and so and so and so. So those are things I'm hoping you're going to take some time to think about before you actually approve this regulation amendment for our town. Thank you for your time.
Question, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Carly. Yes.
Thank you for the insightful review. I appreciate it.
You're
And I'm
welcome.
sure the rest of my colleagues do as well. Just one question. I know you're very careful about your choice of words. Very careful. Not being a linguist, I want to ask you a question. On page 26, I know your comments about the outside expert, but instead of odor control plan, you say odor mitigation plan.
I think that's what I read in the
To
regulation.
me, mitigation means to diminish, but not to control. So would you have any objection to odor control plan?
No.
Which I think is more of an industry term?
No, I would not have a
Okay,
complaint.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? General comments? In favor? Any? Floor is open.
Thank you so much, as always.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll get together.
Ben Tamsky, 5 Edgemont Street, Mystic. I just want to thank staff for, I think, doing a fantastic job on this. I think Carly made some good points, but overall, I think that Keith has presented a very thorough review of other states and other towns in Connecticut that have already adopted zoning regulations for cannabis. And the only other thing I wanted to point out is that Keith did have it exactly right as far as the hours coinciding or correlating with the hours for liquor stores. They are Monday to Saturday, 8 to 10, and Sunday, 10 to 6. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ben.
So I did want to point out one thing I didn't mention before. I mentioned that these are prohibited in all the floating zones, but in the NDD, the Neighborhood Development District, there is an exception for properties rezoned to NDD from the HI 60 or TC 80 districts, and that's because the retail establishments are allowed there anyway. I didn't want this to be a disincentive to the master planning that can be done with the NDD.
Come on up.
They should probably clarify, though, that we're talking about retail, because those are the ones allowed in the HI 60 and TC 80.
Hi, I'm Laura Graham. I live at number 2 Moss Street.
Yeah, hold the
Can you-
microphone
okay.
up, maybe, Frank. There you go.
Can you hear me better? Okay, sorry. I'm basically here to introduce my friend Melissa Maher, who is sitting over there. Melissa and I were cheerleaders from middle school on and together and been friends for a long time. And we walk together 3 mornings a week. And I'm telling you this because it has been my education period to learn about medical marijuana. She is has been a traditional pharmacist for many decades and then recently became the manager of a medical marijuana facility in Groton, Connecticut called Cureleaf. And she has a whole bunch of information about the legal issues in Connecticut and some very well-informed opinions about cannabis in Connecticut. So basically, I'm here to introduce that. I want to thank you for Keith for doing a really good job, and I like the idea of comparing to different towns. I remember, I've lived here since I was 2 with periods away, but I remember when the casinos came in and friends who had very tranquil farms in Preston, and they felt like their lives were destroyed by that happening. You know, they'd wake up, I remember a friend said, you know, my peonies have a drunk man waking up in my peonies now, you know, and I think when people are afraid of marijuana coming to Stonington, they're afraid of that. They're afraid of Cheech and Chong and just like, you know, complete chaos happening in our community. And learning what I have from Melissa, I think through careful regulation and good zoning, you can avoid anything really disruptive. My best friend from college lives in Great Barrington, the Berkshires, and she told me a story when they first started opening dispensaries there, how their lives were really changed in that there were lines of 1,000 people waiting to buy legal pot and gummy bears and all of the other things they have. And the other thing she realized, she doesn't smoke pot, I don't smoke pot, but there's so many people who do. And besides even the medical marijuana thing, a lot of people use it recreationally. And I think that's something that people who don't use it will suddenly become aware of when this is that there really are a lot of people who are buying it on the street now who will be able to buy it in a legal manner. And they also won't have to drive to the Berkshires or to, I think Warwick, Rhode Island is the closest one. So I'm not gonna make it real short because I want her to have plenty of time to talk to you guys. She took some notes about the things that Carlene mentioned, and I hope this is helpful. Thanks so much for the good work you guys do.
Hello. Thank you, Laura. My name is Melissa Maher, and like Laura said, I'm the manager and of Cureleaf in Groton, Connecticut. And I have been with Cureleaf since day one, since 2019. We opened our doors 2 years ago, and I've seen that place go from 0 patients to over 2,100 patients. I've seen people come in that have been cured of cancer. I've seen people come in that couldn't stop shaking and had caregivers, either their children or their spouse that had Parkinson's, and they're using their medical marijuana and now they don't shake and now they don't need a caregiver. I've seen children who unfortunately have passed away, but without that medical marijuana, they would have passed way sooner. I have seen patients that have severe PTSD, whether it be, there's rape victims, there's people that have come that have, been on the front lines, whether they were in Vietnam or, whatever war they've ever fought, that they come in and they're all patients. And, to see what has happened to them and to see how much they've grown and have become better is such a testament, because I will tell you right now, 5, maybe even 10 years ago, if you told me that I was going to be running a medical marijuana dispensary, I would have laughed at you. When my girls were in high school, I would drug test them. I was anything but for marijuana. I was uneducated. I knew nothing. And now I have taken so many classes, I've gotten certified, and including my father-in-law, who it'll be 2 years in December, passed away. He became a cannabis user because he had cancer, and he lasted an extra 5 years because he was using RSO, and that kept that man alive. And so I'm a real believer of it. I understand how recreation can work and how it can be very frightening, and I agree with that. However, I think the state of Connecticut as a whole does an incredible job at mandating and the regulations. We have the strictest in the country. The products that are produced by the 4 growers in the state of Connecticut, which include Cureleaf, Advanced Grow Labs, which is owned by GTI, which is Green Thumb Industries, CT Pharma, and Theraplant, are by far the best marijuana that is tested by third parties across the country, better than any state in this country. I will tell you that I am a patient. I suffer from severe fibromyalgia because I got bit when I was 11 years old in Stonington Borough by the tick line. I was one of the first kids. I almost died. It sucked. At 38, I had my first knee replacement, and 2 years later, it came apart because I had Lyme. I had to do it again. And now I have one my last knee replacement, and as my doctor would say, it's like having a Ferrari with one set of brakes and one set of tires. And so I don't smoke, I vape, or I take some edibles. But in the state of Connecticut, there are no gummies, there's no candy. Their belief is that we want to protect our children. And so they put in these very stringent regulations that are almost to the point of you've got to be kidding, but are absolutely in place to protect everybody, every town. And, you know, I'm a firm believer that this could help our town as far as taxes and things. I want to be concerned, though, about one thing, is that I know that you guys had said that you're only going to allow a recreational facility, but it should be really thought about that you should consider a hybrid. And the reason you should consider a hybrid is because no matter what, a pharmacist has to be present. And a pharmacist is used as to bridge the gap between a patient and whatever medication they're going to be getting, whether it's regulation, adult use, or whether it's medical. And you can, you know, we counsel every single patient that comes in at length. It's a regulation, actually. After a whole year, we have to ask them questions again. They fill out forms. Like, it's not just, oh, come and buy your marijuana. It's not like that at all. As far as delivery is concerned, when she was talking about delivery means to the patient. It doesn't necessarily, in the regs it talks about, you know, what is delivery? Delivery is picking up from different dispensaries and delivering it to the patient. As far as, so in the state of Connecticut, who regulates this? It's the Department of Consumer Protection. There is no Department of Health in Connecticut. It's called the Department of Consumer Protection, and that's what this is all under. As far as micro cultivators, everything is grown inside. I have been, out of the 3 cultivators that are in Connecticut, I've been to 3 of them. They do not smell. You don't even know they're there. The signage is a big deal in Connecticut. You can only have the sign, I think it might be like 12 by 12 or 12 by 16 or something like that. Like the sign that we have is on the side of the building, and it is this big, literally. That's it. There's no big sign. There's no big lights. They don't allow it. So when it comes time for the odor control, I think that, you know, we should have people, whether it be myself or someone else that could help you, to understand, like, how does these plants grow? And, you know, first there's certain times that there's a growth cycle. They have to be in the dark for like 12 hours. They have to have light. Everything, the humidity has to be perfect. I mean, the conditions have to be perfect for you to be able to grow marijuana. And the only time you would ever smell anything is if someone was smoking a joint or if someone was smoking flower. But other than that, that's not happening at the grow. What are they doing at the grow? They're you know, hydroponics. It's vertical integration. All these things are, again, regulated very stringently by the state of Connecticut. You are not getting away with anything. At my store alone, we have like 40 cameras. The only cameras that don't exist are actually in the bathroom, but you can't walk in that place without those cameras. You know, you take a bill out of the drawer, it's filmed. Nothing happens without the state knowing. They know everything. So rest assured that whatever happens for the town of Stonington, the state will help you regulate absolutely everything. As far as hours are concerned, for Curaleaf, we're open Monday through Thursday, and we're open only 9 to 6. On Friday, 9 to 7. On Saturday, we're open 9 to 6. And on Sunday, we're open 9 to 3. Just so you know. Medical patients, just so you know, are allowed to grow marijuana. So if you're worried about, the smelling of growing plants, they don't really smell. So anybody can, if you have your medical card, you're allowed to grow 3 mature and 3 immature plants with a max of 12 plants per household. And that went into effect last October. Come July 1st of 2023, anybody can grow. So the whole idea of this odor problem is not just about the cultivators. You're gonna have to worry about anybody who's got their license or anybody who's got seeds. So I think it's way more than that. I think education, when it comes time for marijuana as a whole, needs to be implemented. And, I think education is the key. I think everybody, whether you take a class, whether you go online, whether you have someone come in and teach it, I just think the more you know, the better the foundation. You won't feel blindsided, or you won't feel like you don't know, or you won't have those barriers like I did. I mean, drug testing my kids did not make me happy, and certainly didn't make them happy, but I was so rigid. And, I shouldn't have been. I should have been more understanding and understanding why they wanted to do that. I mean, I had never smoked marijuana a day in my life till I got my card. And I was amazed. I don't do it to get high at all. I do it so I can get out of bed every single morning without aching or hurting or being able to pick up a pencil, or my wrists don't hurt so much that I can't, type or whatever. And this goes for anybody else who, whether they're getting it off the street, like Laura said, or they are getting it, from the medical facility. It doesn't matter, but at least from a medical standpoint, or, the stuff is tested. And there's regulations that are very, very strict that the state provided, and they have to follow those. And those people that test are third party. And so, obviously the grows will test in-house, but they have to, mandated by the state. They have to be outsourced. And so when those come back, then they go up to the state, and then they present everything, and then you get a new, whatever it is. And it's all prepackaged. Nothing comes to us that's not prepackaged. It's not like deli style like it is in Pennsylvania, where you have these massive jars and people can smell. There's the odor factor. That's not the way it is in Connecticut. When I walk into the dispensary, you can't smell anything. Everything is prepackaged. Another thing that we need to be concerned about is the vault. Like, I never even heard anybody talk about how you're going to store the stuff. You need a vault. And those vault measures have to be put into place long before you decide anything else. According to state regulations, a vault is it is a 8-inch thick concrete with rebar, vertical and horizontal, tied every 6 inches. And I'm not just talking the floor and the walls. That includes the ceiling. So nothing. We have a the big bank vault door. And security. We have so much security. It is unbelievable. No one's coming in, and no one's going to leave either. So all these things, I think it's really important for you guys to understand, from at least a medical standpoint, how it really works. Because I don't think you do know that. And maybe I could be wrong, and maybe one of you could be a patient. I have no idea. But I do know that the more you know, the better informed you're going to be, and the better decision making you're going to make, and you're going to do that for the town as a whole. And I thought you did a really good job, Keith, about bringing everything up. But I just thought that I would let you guys kind of know about all the things that happen, at least in the medical point. And I think having a just rec could be a little dangerous. Those lines are true. We have Curaleafs, we have 4 of them in Massachusetts, and those lines are real. If you're a hybrid store, at least you're gonna have a pharmacist present, no matter what. And the other thing is, if the state has a choice, who wins, medical will always win, always. Because it's considered medication, it's considered a pharmacy. And I just thought I would bring those points to light for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I know you have questions, but I just want to admit, there's no more lines in Massachusetts. That was just.
Can you please use the microphone?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I just wanted to add, because Ben was saying, are there still lines? And she was repeating lines. In Massachusetts, there's now, in that area, in the Berkshires where my friend is, there's, I think, 5 or 6 stores. I mean, everyone's doing it, because the amount of money that these places generate, she didn't announce. How much did you make this last quarter?
We're on track to make 6 million.
Yeah, in 1 year. Yeah, so the numbers are so extreme that everyone's jumping on the bandwagon in the Berkshires, and people who are formerly brewing beer or working distilleries are now opening recreational marijuana stores. Another thing I just want to add is they are really fancy. That's another thing that was a surprise to me, is just how well designed, because there's all this money, right? So it's kind of like the casino. You have a lot of money to throw around to design and build things, and the stores are, it's not a cruddy, yucky place that you go to. They're fancy, and it's the money. It's just the huge amount of money, which you guys have read about. So, have a good night. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. Anyone else? Keith, do you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, I just have one other question.
Oh.
How are you going to choose? How do you choose who's going to get the license? That's the other question. So I know right now there's 37,000 applications, and I don't know how many of them are for Stonington. So 37,000 applications
I assume
were
the
put.
state would guide us on that. I don't know how it works.
Right, so they just approved 14 cultivators in the state of Connecticut.
Right.
So of those 14, I don't know where they are. So the question is, say they approve 5 and those 5 happen to be in Stonington, how are you going to choose which of those 5 are going to be allowed to open business in the town if you're only allowing 1?
I figure the state, limits them more on the licensing. We just sort of review it as a land use application, sort of like restaurants or something like that,
Yeah,
where we have these limits of 1 per type, so someone will come to us and we'll.
So whichever application
Yeah.
comes to us first and meets the requirement and
Yeah.
is approved, that's the application.
okay,
So if there were 5 and 1 came in April and was denied.
Yeah.
2 came in May.
Yeah.
Right, whoever was first on the docket approved, they're the one who would be
Okay.
approved.
but you're only allowing adult use applications, not hybrid or,
It's
Well,
up for
The
discussion.
proposal
That's what
is-
was, that's what's originally proposed in here because of the population limit.
yeah,
But one of
yeah,
my questions to the commission is going to be, do you want to also have the hybrid as well as the retail? It could still be the limit of 1 hybrid or retail. But there's really no reason not to do that.
Is there anything that would prohibit us from adding it afterwards?
No. We just have to go through this whole process again.
I think Carlene makes a very good, valid point on what the voters voted on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
They
the
said they want
piece that
I think that's a very,
what the voters voted on was exactly what she described very well.
right,
1 of each.
so we
Oh,
could-
yeah.
That didn't
Yeah.
include
And-
the
so if one, if we, one,
Not to say that you haven't made some very good points, because I appreciate, you sharing your experience and
sure.
it was enlightening. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no worries. And if you ever need any other, help or anything, like I said, I'm pretty well versed, especially when he was talking about the size of the micro grows. I'm like, yeah, it's 10,000. I think it's 2 to 10. The reason it does go up to 15 is because after a certain amount of time, they allow for expansion up to 5,000 square feet. That's where it goes to 15. But those are the state regulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
What I was,
Sorry, I'd like to add the reason that people people aren't here tonight, I think, is because they felt like there was a fait accompli, in the sense that we voted on it, we said yes, and it's just a done deal. So I think most of the people that you might have expected to be here just figured it was done, and you guys will figure out the details, and it's gonna go forward.
Thank you.
And what I was trying to say is that we could still have the limit of one retailer / hybrid
Agreed.
and one microcultivator, not one retail plus a hybrid.
Right.
So that's sort of tough to communicate.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time
That's a good
speaking it
point.
now, so it has to be worded carefully if we say that.
That might be a way to proceed.
And Keith, I thought another point that was brought up at the very end was that the micro cultivators are anywhere from the state 2 to 10,000, and you picked the max of 10,000. And I don't think that came through in the discussion. I thought that there was 10,000, but it's, a cultivator is defined, a micro cultivator is defined, from what I've heard, from 2 to 10,000.
Right. So someone could come with a 2,000 square foot one.
Yeah. That's,
So, if we're continuing this till the next meeting,
please.
I assume that, you'll want to
Is there
see
any-
some of these
is there- actually,
changes.
let's ask, is there any dissent on that, of continuing the meeting?
No, I think it's a good idea
Okay.
to do that, because I think we have a lot of feedback
Yeah.
incorporated, and I do think it also gives us an opportunity to perhaps put the word out to the town.
A press release.
More emphatically, hey, we're considering this, if you want to weigh in, you have an opportunity.
So you have your homework assignments, Keith, you want to read back to us?
Yeah, I think, just to go over some of the things that we were talking about, possibly amending the hours, but I think I lost track of what the,
I think we're going to amend them to match liquor store hours.
yeah, to match liquor stores,
Right.
what that is. Adding language about actually implementing the odor control plan, calling it odor control.
Implementing and adhering to.
Yeah. Adhere to.
And I think we're going to have to do a little bit more research on that too, right, Keith? So,
Yeah.
Yeah, to get environmental, what did you suggest?
LEP
LEP.
or industrial hydrants.
Where's that?
Who may tell us, quite frankly, that what we've heard from our expert tonight here is that odor control is not an issue in a dispensary.
Yes, Carleen?
You're talking about hybrid, and she talked about a hybrid, but it's not defined anywhere. It's just a word in Article 5. So let's talk about what is a hybrid. Let's define it.
I believe it's hybrid, medical,
It says, yeah, medical marijuana
Medical
product.
retail.
and recreational.
You're selling both. You've got,
Both.
you do both.
Correct, you
They're
can
separated.
sell,
They're separated. So you have a rec side and a medical side.
Within the
In
store.
the same building?
Yeah, it would be the same
Right.
thing. You have two separate entrances,
Yeah,
there's two different vaults.
Makes sense.
Have a discussion.
It's,
Well,
Yeah.
you can't do it.
Yeah. You all right, Carleen?
Yeah, I just, I'm, very detailed oriented when it comes to regulations.
Correct.
Because someone's always going to find a loophole. So you have to think about the loopholes before they appear.
Thank you.
We're so grateful for the work you do.
Laura? Please use the microphone if you have further discussion.
She was addressing me.
So, okay.
We're trying to wrap things up.
Sorry, I'm just saying how grateful I am for the good work that she does, because she does go through everything. And the only reason that Melissa and I are here tonight is because she sent me an email that this was happening, and Ben Tamsky as well.
Well, it's a good point that at least our regulation here doesn't have a definition of hybrid cannabis establishment, so.
Does the state have a definition?
I think they do.
The red hat's not allowed anywhere. It's got all ends across all the things, so,
Yeah, unless we decide to add it in there. As far as the other changes, adding that places of worship should also be 1,000 feet away, adding that it's prohibited in the Maritime Heritage District. specifying that in the NDD, where it is allowed in the TC80 and HI60 zones, that it's only for retail cannabis, not the other types. And is the consensus to also add the option of hybrid instead of retail,
I think
but still limiting it just to one?
Either or.
Either or.
One, either or.
Yeah,
And I think we do need the definition of what
Right.
it is specifically.
Correct.
I just again, and I don't know off the top of my head, but I would like the verbatim what the town voted on, verbatim.
The vote itself, the call,
I'm sorry?
the call.
Yeah, what was the vote, what was the word? So
What would,
the actual
that is
vote,
what we
was the
should
wording
be enacting here,
to keep
what the
it?
town voted on.
thank you. Yeah, I don't have the vote with me. I think it was a more general thing, but yeah, that's something that'd be good to know. And Ms. Graham was showing me the definition of hybrid retailer from the state, so there is a definition.
To Lynn's point, just out of curiosity, would it make sense to actually put the wording of the vote at the beginning of this, so everybody knows, here's what the town voted, and then here's how we're interpreting it?
That would be very
Just,
helpful.
you know, for larger public consumption.
Keith, I think you were also specifying, you said, public parks, school, daycare, places of worship, and residential. Those were the things you were specifying.
Residential,
Within
It's-
1,000.
It's all written up here.
residential is in there as 100 for now. 1,000 would be very difficult to cite anything.
But we said that's what we wanted. We said make it simple, keep it 1,000 across.
Okay, I was thinking it was just places of worship. 1,000 would be difficult for residential. When you think of a place like the HI60 zone, where sort of might be the obvious place for a retailer, there are some houses peppered in the HI60 zone. So 1,000 feet,
But we're not necessarily wanting to treat this like any other retailer. So that's part of the point. So we're having separate regulation on how we're doing this.
Yeah.
And
I agree, I think that would be, you need 1,000 feet is too many feet, I think, for residential, especially in those areas that they pointed out. I think that can be the exception, I didn't hear residential previously.
Would 500 be more acceptable?
I think the 100 is
I
still
agree.
okay. I'm personally in favor of the 100 foot for the places of worship and residential.
I had initially scratched down
100 feet?
250.
What's that?
I put down 250 when I was reading it and taking notes.
It's just
A month
that
ago.
Wait,
we're already restricting it quite a bit as to where it can happen in
Yeah.
town. And we may end up basically saying, you can build on this lot or this lot.
I agree.
And I'm not sure that's a decision we should be bringing to so narrow a scope.
1,000 feet's a pretty big distance.
Yeah,
well,
it's a fifth
that's
of a
what we
mile.
said though.
I agree
But
with
we're
schools.
still in
I agree
discussion.
with schools and things like that when it's children, but I agree, I didn't understand the worship or the residential.
Well, there's children there too. So, I
Yeah,
mean,
but
it's
the
the
school
same.
is dedicated to children, whereas,
Keith, is there any way we could look at seeing maybe other towns, if they had any specific distances, you know, that they've used and said, yes, this works, this seems to make
They-
it viable?
they do. It's tough to translate because different towns are different, and they allow them in different areas, where they might allow them in a more downtown type of district. So it's hard to translate that to your own town.
Is there
I
any
guess
kind of
it's-
commonality, or, you know, consistent most seem to have 250, 500, or 1,000? I'm just trying to get a sense of.
There's so few in Connecticut that there isn't a real consistent amount.
Okay.
So here's
How
my-
about, just out of curiosity, how about in Massachusetts, you know, since they're more up there? And you may not know the answer.
Yeah,
I think more than comparing it to other regulations, are we by, you know, the doctrine of impracticality with 1,000 feet, saying we made it virtually impossible
Well, I think that's
to
it.
put something in there. You
That's
know,
Andy's point.
we certainly, on the basis of what was just said to us, we don't want to make it impossible for somebody to do this. And so from the standpoint of what that distance is, and I think you raised a good point, Lena, I'm not glossing over it, but from the standpoint of what that distance should really be, I think there's a practical aspect to it, is what does 1,000 feet mean, what does 100 feet mean? And how impractical are we making it by within that range somehow? So I think maybe Keith can take a look at that for us and come back to us with something that talks about what does this mean from a practical standpoint?
Yeah,
In
that
the
would
zones
be great
we're-
to have
in the zones we're
examples.
contemplating.
Yeah. Because
So-
one of my concerns is, really, we're not gonna have 4 of these in the town, right?
Right.
We heard that, the lines are out to the kazoo. I mean, I don't think somebody's gonna want that right next door to them, so I do think having a practical
Yeah, that makes sense.
example of where this would land, if it was this versus that, is probably good for the next meeting.
And you're very right that the voters approved something very specific, and that's what I think.
And
That's
I
what I think
assume
we've
whoever
got
wrote
the-
it
got the call.
specifically.
the mandate to
Yeah.
consider here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just one point, Mr. Chairman.
One moment. Keith, do you still have more?
Let me see if there was anything else we talked, I think that covered all the things that we talked about for the regulation.
Yes, Ben?
Yeah, very briefly.
Please use the microphone.
Very, very briefly, I'd just like to remind you that a special use permit would be required. So I think, overthinking the distances and so forth, I think could be worked out in the individual application process, especially since it's only going to be one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did we want to, just for tonight, did you want to go over any of the things in the public comments that were raised, section by section? Or do we want to wait until next month? And Keith, you can kind of work it in, or,
I think,
Well-
Keith's got the list of what Carlene and.
I think the word substitutions
Makes
and
sense.
the Department of Consumer Protection
Yep.
and things, it's just, those are practical things, and I think Keith covered the more pragmatic things that were raised.
Yeah, I mean,
What about the M1 zone should add cell in Article 5?
I'm sorry, what's your question, Lynn? Can you use the microphone?
I'm just referring back to some of the comments that were brought forward, and I believe
Can you use the microphone?
my chicken scratch said that in Article 5, it mentioned the M1 zone, and then
Yeah.
you look at what's allowed in M1 zone, and it's everything but cell. And did we want to add that in? Again, I'm just referring to the comments that were raised.
Yeah. I mean, the way I looked at it is the M1 delivery zone would be appropriate for delivery and transport. It would basically be a business
Okay, so
with some
we heard
vans that
from-
would deliver stuff.
Okay, so what we heard from public comments, again, is that delivery means to the end user. The public comment said to the patient, but they were referring to, something different, medical versus retailer. So it's to the end user. So again, just trying to be very specific here. When you say delivery to the end user, delivery to, I'm just, again, trying to clarify.
Well, there is a definition of
And maybe you
it.
just want to work on it, Keith, I'm just bringing it forward.
Yeah, there is a definition of it, which is a person licensed to deliver cannabis from microcultivators, retailers and hybrid retailers to consumers in research program subjects, and hybrid retailers and dispensary facilities to qualifying patients.
So does that mean that in the M1, you would be able to have the retail?
No,
That would,
no, because retailers aren't allowed. Microcultivators would be, and you could have a delivery service where microcultivator they deliver the stuff from the micro cultivator elsewhere to consumers or hybrid
Maybe
retailers.
chart.
It's basically, yeah, a delivery service, and it didn't seem like something that would be too risky in the M1 zone, but not retail. As far as the definitions, I mean, I'm hesitant to change anything that's taken from the state statute. Describing what the word department means makes sense, because
Yep.
when you read their whole statutes, it
Thank
makes
you.
sense, but
Right,
not just the word department.
good. Andy, any other comments?
I think, is it Ben as well? I think I would agree with Ben's general sentiment that we don't want to overthink this too much. I do agree that it's worth developing a good framework for this in case in the future it's something that we want to expand upon. But I think that since we will be doing the special use permit for the first of each of these, we will learn a lot. And if we decide to expand and allow more of these to happen in town, we will then be armed with much more experience. And it might be worth going through a public hearing again at that point.
My only concern, Andy, is this. When we deny a special use permit for something that's allowed, you have to have specific reasons.
Sure.
Those reasons have to stand up. And if you don't have anything to refer back to say, in this instance, I'm just making it up, 25 feet wasn't good enough, we have to say, well, why isn't it good enough, right? So again, saying special use permit and needing a special use permit and not having a regulation to refer back to allow you to deny the special use permit, I think opens this up. That's the reason.
On that note, I think that maybe one of the things I haven't heard talked about that much that I think would be a good idea is to make specific requirements for the parking for the retail venue, because I do think that that is something you do not want a line forming on a road, people trying to get into a parking lot that's full. That could get really ugly. I think these retail places, it may look ridiculous in 5 years when they're not as heavily trafficked anymore, but I think they need a really big parking lot.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't know that.
Could require a traffic study.
Yes.
And then the parking be based on a traffic study.
That would make sense.
I'm thinking like the old Mystic Theater, the Stonington Regal, like that size parking lot, but that might be overkill.
Oh. Well,
Most
that's
special
there,
permits.
more than 100 foot.
Most special permits for.
Or like the seaport,
Uses that are hybrids or don't really conform to like an ITE standard, Institute of Traffic Engineer standard, require a traffic study. And, we have the ability to require that as a part of a special permit. As Lynn says, there's a lot of criteria that go into approval of a special permit, and whether it is in the best interest of the town to approve it. A traffic study is one. And quite frankly, since we're only going to have 2 of these, I'm sure they'd have traffic studies, and I'm sure that the parking would be based on that traffic study. And all the queuing and everything else in the entrance and exit scenarios would be analyzed in that. So,
Okay.
but I think it's a very good point. We may want to consider putting in the regulations.
I had no idea. So this is just referred to as retail. How many spaces per square foot?
Imagine if
Yeah.
a liquor store opened up and it was the only liquor store within 50 miles.
Busy.
It would be busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that.
Traffic
that's a
study,
great point.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
Yeah,
think
the
a traffic study
regulation-
would cover it though, and that the parking would have to be sized based on the traffic.
Makes sense to me.
yeah, and the regulation talks about a traffic and parking management
Yep.
plan. you know, it can probably add language about a traffic study specifically. I mean, those tend to be more about congestion rather than parking, but traffic and parking study or something like that.
They do also, though, Keith, they talk about the 24-hour arrival and departure sequence. And, you know, that would be a basis for calculating how much parking you need, the arrivals and departures.
Yeah.
And then they would do that on they would go to another store or something, since there's nothing here?
I think that, you know, normally when you don't have like an ITD standard, Institute of Traffic Engineer standard, what they do is they take and they count an actual store in a town with, you know, similar demographics. And you get the arrival and departure sequence, you know, by cars driving over it too. So you get actual counts of actual stores. From those actuals, they come up with, you know, a hybrid for your store. It's a really good way to do it. It really is.
Keith, you gonna have enough, you want to do this for the 16th? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
You have enough time?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be enough time.
Okay. Yes, Laura, please approach the microphone one last time.
I have not been to the store. That is in the Berkshires, but if you're looking for a store to do a comparison, my daughter who went to school there, she said there's a store that is the equivalent of Macy's in the Berkshires. So that might be something you could check out.
I'd be curious if the other Connecticut ones, though.
What's
The
that?
other ones in the Berkshire are much smaller where I've seen them, and they're more a boutique style, a singular small store, like a boutique liquor store.
Yep.
And again, that kind of high-end thing and design, but the one my daughter said, she said, Mom, it is literally like Macy's,
Do you mean size-wise or just?
size-wise.
Okay.
It's big,
Yeah.
yeah, really big.
Thank you.
Do we have to make a motion to close the public hearing for, not really close, it's
To continue it.
correct?
To be continued. Are there any other discussions?
I do just have one other, and it's a question, just based on that comment. And I don't even know if it's feasible or we want to do this, but is there a need to limit or specify maximum square footage or volume or anything like that for this?
I don't know. I mean, I guess we could. Most of them that I've seen, and just sort of, you know, looking online for similar ones. Oh, the retail ones aren't that big.
Okay. I don't
I'm
think
sure
we
they're out
have
there,
it
the
in
big
any
ones.
other part of our regs. I just don't know, but I don't think we have that in any other part of our regs. That something can only be this big versus. At breweries, we do. We do have it for breweries, for microbreweries, we do.
Yeah. But once you're larger, you can be a bigger brewery.
Yeah. But we don't allow, yeah.
Okay, make a motion to table,
Continue.
continue the public hearing until the next meeting on the 16th
Of August.
of August.
Thank you, Ryan. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chuck. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Carlene and crew. Thank you.